Welcome everyone to the inaugural podcast of the Vostokian. This is our first ever podcast, and I really want to thank Dr. Sean Guillory of Sean's Russia blog for speaking with me and telling me how to create a podcast and run one. We're very excited today to be talking about a very important issue in the Balkans, the name dispute between Macedonia and Greece. For those of you who don't know about the name dispute, Macedonia and Greece both claim the rights to the name Macedonia. Greece does not recognize Macedonia as the Republic of Macedonia. They recognize them as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And this opposition to Macedonia's name has caused a lot of problems for Macedonia on the global stage. They've had issues joining the United Nations, getting into the European Union, and generally integrating into the international community. The reasons that Greece doesn't agree with Macedonia's use of this name are, one, that it thinks it usurps what the Greeks consider their own history, that of Alexander the Great and the Kingdom of Macedonia, and second, that they worry it could lead to claims on currently Greek territory, including the northern parts of Greece, which many Macedonians claim is part of Macedonia. So today we're going to be discussing this issue. And we have three students and young professionals who know a lot about the issue and are from the region. The first of those is Alkis. Alkis is a Greek young professional from the city of Thessaloniki. He studied at the Perotis College in Thessaloniki, the American university. And he studied politics and is an expert on Greek and Balkan politics. Kristijan Fidanovski is an editor at the Vostokian, the editor-in-chief, and Kristijan studies at University College in London. He is Macedonian and is from the Macedonian capital of Skopje, and at UCL he studies politics as well, and he also works for Macedonia 2025 as an intern. Hristovski is our last speaker today. Mario is a student at The Ohio State University where he studies international business. He's also a board member of the Macedonian youth group Generation M, and he's passionate about politics and social issues in the Balkans. So, we're going to begin with a question that I want to pose to all of you, and I want you to answer in alphabetical order. And the question that we're posing today is, how should Macedonia and Greece resolve this name dispute? And so, since we're going in alphabetical order, our first speaker is going to be Alkis, who I'll turn the floor over to now.
Hello from Thessaloniki. Okay, so the question, Alex, is a hard one in what sense? One should realize why the question is being asked. What I mean, I can call Macedonia, the country, as Macedonia without a problem, as you can see. I don't have an issue with that. Macedonians are, people just like the Greek people. I don't have an issue. So if I accept to call it Macedonia from my side, I take my ego out of the question, I take the nationalism out of the question, I take nations out of the question, and I see and I answer to the question just like that. If it's a matter of the name alone, let it be called Macedonia. It's just a nationalistic idea of Macedonians should not be, strengthened by this way. I do not want Macedonian nationalism to rise, and I do not want Greek nationalism to rise. What do I mean? We have Golden Dawn in Greece, as you know. 5% of the elections are won by a Nazi party. When Macedonia is being recognized as a Republic of Macedonia, as the majority of people want to call it, some people here will be angry, and these guys will be the nationalists of the country. And I do not like them as how many as they are now. I do not want to wish to see this number rise more. So, if I respect you and I call you Macedonian, you should also respect those particular people who want to self-identify as Macedonians also. This is the tricky part. You cannot call just one part of the people Macedonian. If all of them want to be called Macedonian, I am nobody to stop them from doing that. I do not have the authority to do that. So it's as we see and as we all know from the region, is a matter that involves culture, it involves politics, it involves school education, which is another huge topic. So yes, this is pretty much what I wanted to say as an introduction. So as the conversation will go on and people will express the...
Yeah, thank you very much, Alki. So, Kristijan, do you want to jump in and give your opinion?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Alex, for giving the initiative for this podcast. And thank you very much, Alki, for participating and for offering a very insightful summary of the issue. Essentially, I agree with you. I agree with you that nationalism is a huge problem in both countries, and that fortunately, most people do not agree with the nationalists in Macedonia and in Greece. However, I need to remind you that in 1993, which is before Macedonia joined the United Nations, Macedonia became a member in April 1993 under the name former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Before that, there were huge demonstrations in Athens, over 1.6 million people, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not at the same time, but during the whole wave of protests, who took to the streets to basically protest against Macedonia entering the United Nations as Macedonia, which was the initial reason why we got the temporary name Fyrom, which was supposed to stay there for a few months, but we're actually still stuck with it in 2016. I would really like to share your optimism. I wish I could share your optimism.
Kristijan,
so obviously, Alki knows the situation in Greece right now much better than me, so I really hope he's right. But I think that less than a generation after those protests in 1993, there is still huge opposition among the Greek people towards the name Macedonia. And I think this is a huge issue moving forward. I would just like to use this opening statement to highlight what is the main problem, in my opinion, at the moment. No one really has an incentive to solve the issue the way things are right now. Neither Macedonia nor Greece. It benefits the Macedonian government to have this kind of deadlock that we're in right now, because that way they can blame our poor progress in terms of European integration on the name issue. So until the European Union actually gives us an incentive to solve the issue, I think that on both sides will remain reluctant to do so. So I think that the international community, and especially the European Union, is currently best placed to actually make meaningful progress on the issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kristijan. Mario, would you like to jump in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. And I just want to say a fantastic job to both Kristijan and Alki. Unfortunately, I'm not going to find much room to disagree with a lot of what you said. You guys did both a fantastic job. And I just want to start off by saying that I do agree nationalism is a problem on both sides. It's, in my opinion, what's causing a stalemate in the progress. I mean, if you go to Skopje, you'll see Alexander the Great everywhere, from statues to pictures. And you go to Thessaloniki, you'll find Alexander the Great's image on trash cans. So both have this enamored nature with Alexander the Great, which is not causing progress. So nationalism aside, we need to talk about the pragmatics of the issue of the name dispute. And Alex did a great job of kind of giving the historical context for the dispute. But I think it's also just a little important to note that this is a relatively recent issue. I mean, up until the 1970s, Greece didn't really have an issue with a country being called Macedonia. I mean, we know from its textbooks, its maps, and even some censuses that it really didn't have any problem calling its neighbor Macedonia and its neighbors Macedonians. So this is just really a recent issue that's come about because of an independent Macedonia. And I'll be talking about what I think the problem is on both sides. But when I talk about Greece or Macedonia, I mainly refer to the governments, as I don't think the people are necessarily to blame. But in my opinion, the issue really can't be solved as long as the government of Greece insists that they alone can be entitled to tell another country or another people, what they can call themselves. Greece denies the existence of a Macedonian people, period, both in Macedonia and in Greece. And so, by extension, they have to deny the right of the Macedonian people to call their country Macedonia. And Greece's argument regarding the idea of Macedonia potentially usurping Greek territory, because it's also called Macedonia, is, in my opinion, a little childish. We know Greece's own prime minister in the 90s, Konstantinos Mitsotakis, even admitted that the name dispute was nothing to do with territorial integrity as much as it was to deny Macedonians the right to be called Macedonians. And if you look at the history, I mean, there's just no basis for this fear. I mean, Macedonia's constitution was changed to say that the borders are inviolable. Within the framework of the EU, which Macedonia aspires to join, there will be no borders, most importantly. And finally, most Macedonians aren't worried about reclaiming Macedonia in their dreams. Their main focus is twofold: recognition of their identity, both in Macedonia and abroad, and entry into international organizations. That's it. If our government, which is currently unpopular, to say the least, attempted to do such an absurd notion as to reclaim territory, I assure you the majority of Macedonians will be widely against that. So that's not really going to be the issue. So in my opinion, if Greece in particular wants to be an integral part of the European Union, there has to be some leeway room on Greece's side. I think Macedonia, despite its rise in nationalism, has compromised quite a bit in the past few years. It entered the United Nations under the name FURAM, which a lot of legal scholars, citing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other human rights conventions, said is a violation of its right to self-identify under its own name. It changed its flag, it changed its constitution even, and so Macedonia has pulled its weight, I would say, but there's still more room to be done. And I'll be a little more optimistic and say that I think there is some room to find a compromise. I think Greece's stance of a geographic modifier such as Northern Macedonia or Upper Macedonia is unacceptable to the Macedonian people. But that being said, I think if we were to work in the framework of a political modifier, that might be more acceptable for international purposes and bilateral relations, such as Democratic Republic of Macedonia, which was already offered, but something along those lines. But what's most important is, I think, that recognition of the minorities in northern Greece has to be brought about. I mean, the U.S. State Department, Helsinki Monitor, UN Human Rights Watch, they all note that there is a Macedonian minority in Greece that's not given rights as Macedonians. So I think that needs to work in tandem with a mutually acceptable solution to the name within the confines of a political modifier as opposed to a geographic one.
Okay, thank you, Mario. So a lot of your argument seemed to just be about the causes for the conflict, but you didn't seem to offer, you did offer some solutions at the end. But I heard from Kristijan that he felt that both sides were kind of at fault here, and it sounded more like on your side that you think it's just the Greeks at fault. Is that correct? Mario? Mario, the question was directed at you.
I apologize. I apologize. My microphone wasn't turned on. I do think both sides are at fault. I think for example, Macedonia's antiquization of its capital does not add to the issue, does not help the issue. But I think, in particular, I would say right now Greece's national sentiment is just a little more on the worrying side, just because, as Alkis put it, they do have neo-Nazi members, very far-right members in their own parliament. It's a very just a few days ago, members from a European meeting were attacked by them just for talking about Macedonia. So I think it's a little more of a dangerous issue on Greece's side. And I think just in the past, Macedonia did make progress. It's starting to veer off that path now. I would say in the 90s it started to. When it brought in Alexander the Great into the conversation, it did kind of lose more of its credibility with the progress. So I think both sides are at fault, but I think right now a larger portion of the deal does reside with Greece, I would say.
Alki, what's your take on that?
I was waiting for the whole Golden Dawn and dangerous politics from the Greek government storm brain to end, so I can provide a picture that will calm the waters down a little bit. I can assure you that in Thessaloniki, fascists do not go and walk around and have whatever they want. What I want to say is we have democracy. No, besides the fact that Golden Dawn is in the parliament, the people and the society itself never turned fascist. It never were. Greeks were never fascists. They were never aggressive. Go walk around and ask the people what they think about the issue. Most of them will not care. The others might get a little sensitive because, as you know, every nation state after the Balkan Wars used nationalism to create the system as it is today. What I mean was that, if we assume that we all agree on history, which is something easy to do academically speaking, we can see that after the Balkan Wars, the governments of the very fresh states used nationalism to take territory, and more territory meant more benefits. That was the mentality back then. Of course, I will not go into historic details about the Macedonian nation. I will not go and dig this information out because it's up to you to self-identify as you wish. But the real problem is that some Greeks, and since I respect the Macedonians and I call them Macedonians, you need to respect those Greeks who are not fascist. They are not Golden Dawn members, and they have the right also to self-identify as Macedonians. We are doomed if we try to blame each other. It's both governments' fault. Both governments in the past decades followed nationalistic approaches just to maintain this Greek idea and Macedonian idea and whatever idea. It's the Balkans. We all know what nationalism did to the states and how wars break out after all of this. Anyway, I got a little off topic again. I would prefer to have discussions instead of monologues. So yeah, let's Alex, you do your own thing.
Alki. Thank you for that very thought out response. I think you and Mario both brought up some really good points. Another thing that I was interested in hearing more about was Kristijan's point, that there aren't enough incentives for the Greek and Macedonian governments to come to a compromise. Kristijan, if you were put in the role of EU commissioner and you had much more power than an actual EU commissioner does and could do whatever you wanted, what actions would you take? What incentives would you give to both sides in order to get them to come to the table and make a compromise?
Well, first of all, we all know that Greece is currently in a very difficult economic situation, so that it would be very inappropriate of me to hypothesize what kind of incentives and concessions can be made from the EU to Greece, and maybe incorporate the name issue into those concessions or put it as a condition. So I would rather not go into that, but I think that the European Union should definitely take a firmer stance on the issue. In the past, we've heard many times from various EU officials in many different forums that once we change the name issue, once we find an acceptable, permanent name for my country, that will basically start our accession negotiations. We've heard that many times, but we need to hear it again, and we need to hear it more often, because right now there are many things going on in Macedonia, which are not the topic of today's podcast, and I'm afraid that the name issue is basically sidelined. We don't talk about it at all internally, and that's wrong. No matter what kind of government we have right now, the name issue should definitely be at the top of the priority list, especially when it comes to foreign policy. I would like to go back to what Alkis said about the current sort of dominant attitude in Greece about the name issue. I don't think, well, obviously, none of us, I hope, think that the Greeks are fascists. That's not even part of this debate. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's reasonable to expect that the Greek people would strongly oppose any kind of Greek name containing the word Macedonia if the name issue were to be resolved tomorrow. I mean, those 1.6 million people that I mentioned on the streets of Athens in 1993, that was only a generation earlier. So I think it's reasonable to assume that might happen again. And finally, I would like to say that with regards to what Mario said about possible solutions to the name issue, I think it's too early to talk about specific proposals at the moment. There have been specific proposals, obviously, when the negotiations were active. What we need to do now is to make the negotiations active again, to start negotiating again, to get in the negotiating room. And in order to do that, we need incentives, and then we can discuss possible solutions. This is just to illustrate how far away we are at the moment from actually resolving the issue.
All right, thank you very much, Kristijan. So I had another question for both Mario and Alki, and I'll direct it towards Mario first. So Mario, you mentioned that there may be a few alternative names that could be used for Macedonia. And Alki, you said that recognizing Macedonia under the name the Republic of Macedonia would just inflame tensions in Greece and point anxieties which are currently internal externally. Mario, why do you think it would be harmful to Macedonia to accept a name like the Republic of Northern Macedonia or the Republic of Vardar Macedonia rather than something like the Republic of Macedonia, or as you suggested, the Democratic Republic of Macedonia, which is somewhat reminiscent of a communist state? So why are those names not okay for Macedonia? Why shouldn't those be used?
Well, to that end, definitely we don't want any association with the communist thing, but as I said, more political would be more acceptable. And what it comes down to is, I mean, for Macedonians, this is the first time in millennia that they actually have an independent state, and their identity is very much ingrained into that notion. And it's if you look at Macedonian history, I mean, it's been years and years of trying to fight for this identity. So now that it's finally there, it's just very hard for a lot of Macedonians to not have the identity attached to it. So geographic modifiers, I think, kind of devalue that and make it look like there's it's Macedonia, but it's a different type of Macedonia. It's not equivalent to the Greek Macedonia, which politics aside, they are both Macedonia. I mean, I'd be very hard pressed to find a historian that says they're not both part of Macedonia. I mean, historical ethnic Macedonia is part of Bulgaria, Greece, and what is today the Republic of Macedonia. But what it comes down to is if it diminishes the ethnic Macedonian identity, is basically with names like Upper Republic of Macedonia, the logical extension is there are Southern Macedonians, which they are part of the Greek identity, but to say that to equate the two as being like equivalent, I think presents a problem with a lot of Macedonians who want to identify as uniquely being Macedonian, their language as being Macedonian. And if you think about it, I mean, it's not just the name. It would have to apply to imports. It would have to apply to references in textbooks, into a whole variety of things. That's part of the reason there's a stalemate, is because all these places that have to be extended to would present a lot of difficulties for Macedonia to actually identify itself as being Macedonian. And a lot of people do have a vested interest in Macedonians not having that identity. I mean, not just in the Balkans, but in a lot of academic circles even. There's that push to kind of diminish the uniqueness of the Macedonian identity. So I think the geographic modifier does represent another extension of that push for a lot of Macedonians. So that's kind of my take on that.
Okay, thank you, Mario. And turning to you, Alki, do you think if a geographic modifier was used, if, for example, the name the Republic of Northern Macedonia was proposed and accepted by the Macedonian government, is that something that Greeks would accept, or, as you said before, would it inflame nationalist tensions?
Look, I cannot hear for all Greeks. I am here to speak for myself, but I will say that I am totally with a geographic name like Northern Macedonia. I think this could be the final solution that would finally push people towards realizing that self-identification does not go with state identification. If your state is called Maria, you are still whoever you are. So it shouldn't worry people too much about the name, and I should tell Mario that today, yes, he should accept that there are two kinds of Macedonians, Greek Macedonians and Macedonians in your sense. So you cannot reject the idea of the existence of another one. I mean, it's not my belief. I do not believe in nations as a whole. But since it is your beliefs, you should also try to see the Greek side as well, the Greek nationalist side, because don't tell me that you are not a nationalist. Your ideas and things that you underline are a little out of reality, if you allow me, because the minorities, for instance, it would be a problem, it was an issue decades ago, but today I do not think that anybody suppresses anybody. And there is a political party. I mean, people who were able to vote it. Anyway, of course, these issues, from my understanding, are a little irrelevant, the minority issues, because I do not hear of any suppression or of any kind of that. And if there is, the authorities are there. Believe me, it's not the Balkan-style authority. If a crime is committed, the police can go there, and there are many leftist and open-minded organizations that should and do help minorities and their problems whenever an issue exists. So, yeah, this is pretty much it. What was the actual question, Alex?
I think you covered the question. It was whether you thought that Greeks would accept a geographically modified name, which you said you thought they would. So, Mario, I think there were some points there that Alki made that you'd probably want to respond to. Do you want to jump in here?
Of course, and Alki, I see your side completely, and I'm not so much speaking like there's like a nationalist side to this, but like my main point is the issue and the status of Macedonians in Greece. And I do not point fingers at Greeks. A lot of Greeks don't even know there are Macedonians in Greece because a lot of them speak Greek, a lot of them have Greek names. But as somebody that's been there, has family there, the situation is quite different. There currently, per Greek law, because there's no recognition of Macedonia, there cannot be Macedonian churches. There are no Macedonian schools there, newspapers even. Linguist Victor Friedman went to Florina, which we call Lerin, to promote a Macedonian.
Could I please interrupt you for a moment, because there are no newspapers, yes, but not because nobody blocks the allowance of those newspapers. You know what I mean? If the population was enough, I am sure nobody would do anything about the newspapers. We don't have a fascist regime ruling Greece.
Let me just respond to that. So, like, for example, there was a promotion of a Macedonian Greek dictionary a year ago by linguist Victor Friedman, and that was widely suppressed. It was even attacked by members, local government members. So, and when there are Macedonian celebrations in villages, there has to be a police presence to ensure that, like, the security of the Macedonians is protected. I mean, it's an unstable time, and there is little effort to be able to declare Macedonians as Macedonian. And this is, like I said, this is a document. This is not just me speaking. I mean, UN Human Rights Watch, I believe in the late 90s, said that even though Macedonians make up a sizable minority in northern Greece, there's a systematic effort to deny their identity. So this is not just me speaking. Reputable organizations have said this. So when I talk about a geographic modifier, what I'm talking about is the fact that with a geographic modifier, the rights of these people, these minorities, is also coming into question as whether they can be actually Macedonian, and the same Macedonian as the Macedonians, the Republic of Macedonia. So, of course, I'm not denying there's a Greek Macedonian. There, of course, that's you live in a place called Macedonia. Of course, you are Greek. By extension, you're Greek Macedonian. But that's the issue of what it comes down to is the status of the minorities. So, recognition of that, there has to be more of an effort, I believe, to reconcile that. And if you know Greece's history, I mean, I'm not going to get into that, but there has been a very systematic effort to deny this identity. I mean, the Greek Civil War, the child refugees in the 40s, it's even today there's a bit of a taboo speaking Macedonian in open places, and this is it's culturally ingrained, even with the government aspect to it. So that's what I mean by the fact that the rights of the minorities has to be working in cooperation with the ethnic Macedonian right to its name. They both have to be in the same boat.
Thank you, Mario. So, Kristijan, did you have anything to say about that?
Well, no, not really at this point. I mean, as I said before, I don't think it's productive to talk about any specific proposals at this point, because the negotiations are not even active, and once they hopefully become active again, we don't know what proposals might actually end up on the table. But I really don't think the Democratic Republic of Macedonia should be considered as any kind of reasonable option, because I personally associate democratic as part of a name with countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of China, which are clearly not democratic. But yeah, I mean, if the other panelists are happy to talk about specific proposals, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Maybe the Democratic People's Republic of Macedonia.
Let's not go there.
Just joking. All right. So this is for Kristijan, and then I'm going to bring the other two of you in on it. This question. So Kristijan, you said that the name issue should be the most important issue in Macedonia right now, and every political party there should bring it to the fore. Any political party that's in power. And so there's a lot of problems going on in both Macedonia and Greece. There's the financial crisis in Greece. Macedonia's economy is also faltering somewhat. There's a political crisis in Macedonia, and both of them are dealing with the migrant crisis. So my question is, aren't there more pressing things for Macedonia and Greece to be worrying about than the name issue? And if not, why should the name issue take precedence over these other issues?
In terms of foreign policy, there is nothing more pressing for Macedonia right now than the name issue. We've had the same government for almost 10 years now, and every time government officials are asked about the country's progress in terms of European integration, they say, we're stuck, we haven't moved an inch, and the only reason why we haven't moved an inch is the name issue. So clearly, the name issue is an issue, we just don't talk about it. I personally disagree with this attitude. I think that the most recent progress report from the European Union, which we got in November last year, clearly shows that there are many other reasons why we're struggling with European integration. It's not just the name issue. Of course, it is one of the most important aspects. But I think that not just the European Union, but every single report that we've received from any credible international organizations in the recent past confirms that there are many other issues in Macedonia, as you yourself, Alex, pointed out. I don't think that the opposition should just say, okay, if you elect us, we'll find a good name for Macedonia, because that's obviously impossible to claim if you haven't talked to the other side yet, and the negotiations are not active at the moment. But what the opposition and all parties in Macedonia right now should start working on is creating creating a fertile soil for this kind of discussion, because right now in Macedonia, over 80% of the people, if I'm not mistaken, according to the most recent polls, would rather not join the European Union than have the name of the country changed. Now, first of all, I don't agree with the formulation of this kind of polls, because if it's a zero-sum game, if it's either, I don't know, Macedonia, Skopje, or EU, or no EU prospects for Macedonia, then obviously even I personally would choose not to join the EU. But I think that we shouldn't represent this question as a zero-sum game, and I think that politicians should work on changing public opinion in this regard, because the people should just stop thinking that getting into the European Union and finding a reasonable, permanent name for Macedonia are mutually exclusive, because they aren't. So it's this kind of thinking that needs to change, at least on the Macedonian side, immediately, in order for the whole issue to move forward.
All right, thank you, Kristijan. Alki, did you have anything to add?
Well, I have many things to add, basically, but I would like just to point out that we should see why Macedonians should, how to put it, I'm trying to say that I believe both Greeks and Macedonians have real issues, economic and social ones, that they need resolving, and nobody from the society really thinks that this is the main issue that needs to be brought to the table. When you don't have to eat, and when you have a government like Gruevski's government to suppress you like that, believe me, the last thing that worries you is the Macedonian name and what others call you. I have friends from Macedonia that don't really care about the name, and I trust that this is what people should do in general, to prioritize their real needs and stop falling victims to nation-state ideas that sustain those hates and divisions between the people. So yeah, as you see, we can go to a long discussion here, and I don't really want to do that, but let's be pragmatic and just focus on why should Greece come back to discussion with Macedonia. We all want to be pragmatic. From my understanding, Macedonia has no real cards to play. Gruevski knows that. This is why he does nothing. Greece, on the other hand, why doesn't Macedonia do something to persuade Greece to come back to discussions, like business, investment, corporations? I don't know, find something. Do you know what I mean? Let's really be pragmatic, because politics work like that. When the other side doesn't have an interest on a topic, he will not join. So yeah, this is my insight on the whole thing.
I think you made a good point there, Alki, that it doesn't seem that Macedonia has much leverage in these negotiations. Mario, how do you think Macedonia could gain leverage over Greece, or does it already have any sort of leverage?
Well, to that regard, the fact that I believe Macedonia does not have leverage is, Greece's government in the early 90s. It was a very skillful political maneuver in terms of the second Macedonia became independent, it was already made the aggressor in every regard, with its name, with territorial sovereignty, with claims on history, with the flag. In every regard, Macedonia was already the aggressor. So now it's very hard to reel back from that and say it's not actually being the aggressor, that it's actually also a victim when it comes to the fact that its identity is being is an attempt to diminish its identity, especially within Greece and also Bulgaria. But that's besides the issue. Macedonia's name and its identity are sacrosanct. I mean, these are basic human rights that every nation has and has a right to. So the fact that it's even being debated, I think, does give Macedonia leverage, and the fact that the name of a whole country is being put on a negotiating table. So to a lot of people, that does seem a little absurd that this is what is happening in the Balkans when we do have other pressing issues. I would say pragmatically more pressing, but the identity of a people, I think, tops that list. So, and we can be pragmatic, which I agree completely with Alki, but even if we do come up with a name, we still have a lot of history to dissect in terms of who can claim what. So that also presents a separate issue that I don't want to really talk about now because we don't have the time, nor it's not the appropriate place, but it's those two unfortunately follow each other. But in regards to solving the name, I do think it will present a lot of progress for the region. I mean, Greece is the entry into Europe for a lot of people. Macedonia is at the crossroads of Eastern Europe. These two countries play extraordinary geographic value to a lot of geopolitics, and I do think that there can be mutual cooperation down the line to combat a lot of the issues, weak economic growth and instability and infrastructure. I mean, we can both invest in infrastructure, a good business relationship. This can all come down the line, of course, but we just have to realize that identity of a whole nation, of a whole people, that's an integral part of being a nation itself. So that's something we cannot lose sight of moving forward. When I talk about, like I said, a political modifier, please don't quote me about saying Democratic Republic is something I want. I'm saying that was the only proposal that was ever suggested that had a political framework to it. But and like I said, this is only for bilateral purposes. I don't want this to be like used for international. But if this is, like I said, like a zero-sum game, and compromising to a point of something that's a little more acceptable just for bilateral relations. Like I said, I think that's the path that I think most Macedonians can work to accept, even with like Kristijan said, if government does work to shape public opinion a little bit more. But like I said, the main issue is the identity cannot be diminished on the international scale.
All right, thank you, Mario. Kristijan, do you have anything to add on the last two topics we spoke about?
The important distinction to make is between whether we want one name, which everybody will use, or different names for different kinds of use. I think that, I mean, this has been discussed heavily, especially when the negotiations were still active. And the debate is whether to have an erga omnes name, as they call it, so one name for everybody, or different versions. I think that the status quo shows us how different names can be extremely confusing. I mean, right now, when I go somewhere, when I go to a foreign country, I don't know how to represent my country without offending people, because right now some countries recognize us as Macedonia, some countries go with the temporary name. I mean, it's extremely confusing, and obviously the UN has recognized us as Firom, but there are very important countries like the United States of America which recognize us as Macedonia. So the status quo shows us that once we go back to negotiation room and once we start discussing actual proposals again, we should really look for an erga omnes solution, as unimaginable as it may seem at the moment, because it's the only way to actually permanently solve the problem.
All right. Thank you very much, Kristijan. So we're running towards the end of our podcast, but I want each of you to be able to make a closing statement of 3 minutes and to cover all of the issues that we went over today and anything that you may have left out earlier. And so we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order this time. So we will begin with Mario. Mario?
Absolutely. I want to thank my fellow speakers. We did, I think, a fantastic job at addressing the issue at hand. But in closing, we have to step back, like I said, from nationalism, from history. I mean, it's very seductive to talk about ancient history and images of Alexander the Great and the glories of ancient Macedonia, but that's really irrelevant for modern discussion, which I think all of us did perfectly well in terms of sidestepping those issues. So what it comes down to is we have two neighbors that have been neighbors for quite a long time, and there is an impediment to them making progress for the Balkans and for themselves. And the only issue, there's nothing overtly standing in between the two. I mean, Macedonia is not amassing tanks at its border. It's not openly talking about reclaiming Macedonia from Greece. The only thing that matters is the simple name of this country, and that's if you do step aside from Macedonia and from Greece, that is a bit of an absurd issue. There can be two Macedonias that exist. That doesn't have to be exclusive. I mean, like I said, there is a geographic region of Macedonia, but I think when it comes down to it, is we can both acknowledge that like there are Greeks that live in Macedonia that can be called Macedonians, but there are also ethnic Macedonians that are not part of another ethnic group. So that's the framework we have to work from. But what we have to realize is this is, like I said, the name of an entire people, an entire country that even has implications outside of its border. So even Macedonians in Greece, Bulgaria, even parts of Serbia, the implications are far-reaching. We may not realize that. So that's what we have to think about moving forward, is the name of a country is not the only issue. It's the issue of an entire people that exist in the Balkans and for many years have existed oppressed and without the basic human rights to self-identify. And the tragedy is not a lot of people know about this. And Alkis, I've not met him, but he seems like he's a very reasonable person and know the whole story to it. And I don't blame him at all for it. But the issue is that it does happen, and a lot of people do not know about it. and this is something that we have to work to make progress in the future.
All right, thank you.
So thank you again.
Thank you, Mario. Kristijan?
I have nothing to say, really. I think we really had a very productive discussion, which is not always the case when there are Macedonians and Greeks in the same conversation, so I'm really happy about that. And thank you once again, Alex, for giving us this opportunity. All
right, thank you, Kristijan. And Alki?
Okay, just wanted to say a few things before we close. We should really make room for other identities, like in the US. I mean, you all seem affected by the US world, and Alex, and from your accent, Mario, also you, and you should all know that identity is a matter of self, and today it's so complex and multi-layered. Somebody can identify from ideology, from sex, from sexual preferences, and this is exactly the same issue. We shouldn't really try to find names for a whole group. Of course not. Within one country of 2 million, 500,000 of them are Albanian. How can you not think of these people? We should not look for group identities. Let's all focus on ourselves first and be the own king of ourselves instead of trying to impose other kings on other people. And let's leave the name issues when we have resolved a more personal level. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Alki. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to listen to our inaugural Vostokian podcast, and Dr. Sean Guillory for giving us advice on how to do it. We should be back in 2 weeks with a new topic, so keep your eyes posted.